Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Bruce.
And I'm your host, Pete.
And we are The Epic Experiment.
If you're new to the show, we talk about all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on primarily playing Commander.
Our show is available on thelotuscouncil.com, your favorite podcast apps, and a variety of social media platforms.
If you want to reach out to us, check the show notes below for our contact information.
Now, on with the show.
Let's get after it. Yeah, so we're going to do our favorite section. Are you excited, Bruce? Because I'm pretty excited.
What's our favorite section?
It's Garbage or Great. Come on now.
Oh, yeah. I like that one. That was fun. I like that one.
We've been doing this for so long that you forgot.
Look, I'm old, man. My brain's like...
I know.
I'm like, so old.
I got to check your expiration date there, Bruce.
My birthday's coming up at the end of the month, so yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, man.
We got to do a birthday episode for you or something. We wish you happy birthday, blow out a cake maybe.
I'm going to be away, but maybe we could do it the one before. Like,
sure, we'll blow out a cake.
My birthday lands on the 30th of July, so I'll be away at camp, so we'll have to do it before.
We'll get some streamers, I'll throw up some,
I thought you were gonna get Voxy and staff around all of the people to come and drop in.
That would be crazy, just get the whole crew to come up. What was that trend over COVID where it was like you could pay a celebrity to do a 5-minute or a minute video?
Yeah.
So for my parents' anniversary, we got this very famous Greek comedian to wish them a happy anniversary, which was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So maybe I can sort that out. Who knows? We'll see.
I don't know.
So
Garbage or Great. Garbage or Great is fun. I love Garbage or Great. One of my favorite sections. All right.
Oh.
So I got a spicy card today. I like this one.
Okay.
All right. Today's card was highly showcased at the most recent Pro Tour in Amsterdam, and it is Unstable Amulet for 1 and a red for an artifact. When Unstable Amulet enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Unstable Amulet deals 1 damage to each opponent. Tap, pay 2 energy, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until you exile another card with Unstable Amulet. I think this card is actually pretty good because that middle clause is actually
It's a win con.
Most potentially, yes. Yeah. So there's actually more and more decks that are usually looking at castings from exile or from all over the place, and I think this is going to play. Yes, the energy decks are going to love this. So Madison Lee is into this. Liberty Prime is down. There's a new energy commander from Modern Horizons 3. I forgot what it's called, but it's actually pretty cool. It makes copies of stuff, but it's also surprisingly good. I think beyond that...
So there's energy, and then there's the potential energy, right? I made a science joke. So I was thinking, if you could buy this back or double the enter the battlefield trigger, there's potential for some good card advantage. Yeah, so Unstable Amulet, I was saying there's other applications depending on what color you're in. So, I don't see this in a Gruul deck unless you're playing Faldorn.
Agreed.
Which would be cool to see. I think you could definitely sacrifice this and buy it back and create more value that way. So, if you're in black and red, that new commander, the Rakdos one that has affinity for artifacts, you could potentially use this and then find ways to get it back. Although I think the most profitable would be in some sort of Izzet or something with white and blue in it as well.
I'm thinking Emery. Emery would be an obvious one to pair this with. So you sack it to an outlet, and then Emery allows you to recast it, and then you can now churn through your deck potentially through stuff. So. I think the card is pretty solid. I think that middle clause is feels a little slow, but the fact that it says do 1 damage to each opponent, if it said deal 1 damage to any target, I'm out. That's too slow. But to any target, to each opponent, that's actually pretty meaningful in a commander game where you can now 1 spell deals 3 damage, 1 to each player. And you can be surprised add that up with a couple of other ways to deal damage to them, whether it's impact tremors or Perforos or the new the molten golem from MH3-2. So creatures come into play, and you're pinging people. Artifacts come into play, and you're a reckless
I
fireweaver,
think
and now you're casting things from exile. I'm imagining some sort of crazy chaosy deck like that.
I think the best like underrated thing to do would be like to overload a Mythic's Mastery or Underworld Breach or something, like flashback a bunch of things in like an Izzet deck and just burn the table that way. But I think, again, I don't know what limitations this would have because I just haven't seen it yet. In terms of like what colors can be used and abuse this stuff. Because I think this was designed for 60 card for Modern to finish games, in a sense, but the Cascade, the Discover stuff, I'm not exactly sure how much of that could be used and abused yet, because I just haven't seen anybody try to do this yet. So,
Flames, Mythic's Mastery. The flashback on that stuff is cool. Like that's really got some potential too. Casting things from the flashback. Ooh, or Madness. Madness decks can play this and do the same thing.
Yeah,
Casting
they can.
from exile.
Yeah.
So maybe Angie or Anya, depending on how you want to pronounce her name. Like she could be like. There's all sorts.
No, because I feel like it takes away from what that deck is trying to do. So that's like an example. I don't know how applicable it would be. The thing with that artifact is like, if you can't buy it back, then you only really get to use it that one time for its other ability, and then if you can't do enough damage outright, it might be tough to finish a game. If there's like a way to infinitely cast something from exile, that might do something, but I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Well, what about Aetherworks Marvel going in a deck?
Yeah, but again, like I said, I don't know if that's necessarily.
There's a lot of really good decoction module.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there's a potential there for like a I think there's a deck that's like.
I'm just playing devil's advocate because of how focused the card is. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
It's pretty focused.
I actually think it's not as focused as you think it is. I think this can slide into as a way.
You test it against me, and if you beat me with it, I'll shake your hand. How about that? All right. So I have the next card. I have the next card. Okay. This one I actually played against you, so we have some sample size for it. So effect. It's from a Commander precon. It's called Storm of Souls. It's 4 colorless and 2 white sorcery. Return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to its other types, and then exile this card. So Bruce, what do you think? You've seen this played against yourself at least once, with me playing it a few days ago. What is your opinion on this? I know it's a little bit expensive, but I think its value is there.
Well, so I mean, my only hesitation with this one is like the mana cost. I'm not even worried about. This is very clearly a late game play, and the fact that you get the creatures back, but instead of being, let's say, 3/3s or 4/4s, they're all 1/1 spirits. I think could be is perfectly fine. I have no problem with that, because I mean, if you go and have an expensive creature with a good ETB, like you're still getting the ETB to come back into play. So I'm not even worried about the mana cost. It's the setup cost to fill your yard with enough things that this is actually worth your while to fire off. So I want to ask you, Pete, as someone who's played the card, at what point are you happy to fire this off? Is it when you get 3 creatures back, 4 creatures back, more? Like, what's the setup cost here in terms of how many things in your yard that you're going to recur before you're pleased to get this effect?
So that's tough, because most times if this is in my opening hand, I'll probably mulligan the hand. Mm-hmm. And in the situation where I was with you and George and Nick, your buddies from Perth, I really had to sandbag that card for a while until I thought it was worth doing. But I think if at minimum you have your commander and maybe two or three other creatures in there, it's not bad to just recur them later in the game when you need some action. Which I was able to get like a clue off of a creature, and then some other ETBs were like power 2 or less trigger, so I drained the table for a little bit of damage. But that was because I had that in there for the sole purpose that it makes my creatures 1/1s, which is what I care about in that particular deck.
Right.
I feel like in other decks where you're trading off creatures pretty frequently, you can definitely use it as a top end card in like a Boros deck where you trade off a bunch of creatures to block with, or you're swinging and somebody tries to 2-for-1 you with like a situation where maybe they flash in some cards or they play Azuri's Predation or something like that, and they kind of sandbag you that way. I don't know. I just think it's a good top end finisher card to like turn the tide in your favor.
I don't view it as a finisher. I don't think it's a finisher because I think that you're not getting enough oomph on the battlefield to be a finisher unless whatever you're getting has some pretty wild enter the battlefield triggers. I think that I don't think the way to get your things in the yard is by having you have to trade off. I think you need to put them there through either self-mill or by cycling or some other way. And so I'm thinking self-mill, first hand in some sort of Abzan pile. Secondly, in a cycling deck where you now cycle a lot of 1 and 2 mana cyclers, maybe like a la Living End sort of style. And then you can then use this as an alternate way to get your things back out of your yard. Because I am of the opinion that like in Commander, we don't actually do that much trading back and forth. Like if you think about it in the average game, there's not a lot of trading. And if you found another dance partner to trade with, you're not you're not attacking into somebody who's got blockers oftentimes. Like that's just not how Commander tends to play as an ebb and flow of the game. So to go and expect yourself to go trade, even as an aggressive attacking deck, you're looking to find somebody who may not have a good block or may have value creatures that they don't want to block with, so that you're not really trading off very frequently. So I think you need to find another way to get your stuff there. Now, it could be a good way for you to recover from a board wipe, which I also see applicability there. So I see good applicability. I think it's more niche than we would like to admit, because of the fact that it does require quite a bit of setup. And so if you're trying to set that up for a big play, that could be a problem.
Just to finish this off, I think the flying aspect is very underrated in Commander, especially in decks where you can grow your creatures pretty quickly anyway, or flicker them to turn them back into what they were normally, which is very...
Does this allow you to do that?
Yeah, they're 1/1 spirits, in addition to their other types. So it doesn't change, like it's not like a permanent effect, it's not like they're tokens or anything. They're just the creature. So you could flicker them, but I don't know, I feel like there's definitely situations where this is something that that could be explored, not just the milling and the and of that sort, but again, like the first card, it's not like a perfect card to include in every white deck or every red deck or whatever. So, I guess these.
Wow. I'm just looking at the EDH rec stats, and how silly would that be with Elish Norn Mother of Machines?
Well, yeah, you get double ETBs, and yeah,
that's kind of wild. I'm a big fan. Anyway, look, I mean, don't get me wrong, Pete. I like the card. I think it's a little more niche, and I think the setup cost is high. But I don't hate the card. But yeah. I have question marks.
The nice thing is too, all the other abilities these creatures have. Like, say you're playing Reese and you're playing elves, and now all your elves are flyers.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is
now
something
you can cast like your Dictate of Heliod, or you can cast your Elish Norn Grand Cenobite, and now all your things are humongous and killing people anyway. So I can definitely see it. You can set it up to be very potent.
Or like Cathar's Crusade was something else that I had considered, because they all ETB and they all get bigger anyway. So that's not a big deal. This was in the Spirit precon as well, so it was a really nice way to close the game out. ironically, it's the what is it? The Storm of Souls. So anyway, let's not digress too much, but basically, Bruce, it's nice to be back playing with you as well. We haven't had the chance to really sit down and play together based with life stuff going on. So Bruce and I were able to play together a few days ago, and we had a blast. We had three or four pretty different kind of games, and took some personal takeaways away from this. So to just preface what we're going to speak about, there's these concept floating around in Commander now about what the commander is meant to do for your deck. So there's this idea of monolithic, and this other more generic idea of like, when we first started playing the game, the commander was really the whole focal point, the whole purpose of the deck. Now it's becoming a little bit more nuanced, where the deck drives itself and the commander is just an extra enabler in the style of deck that you're playing. So we saw a plethora of that when we played together. We had some decks that really got hosed by each other. We had some decks that had, popping off just out of nowhere in terms of what we were playing. So not to get too much into the weeds, but basically this sort of back and forth idea has permeated in a lot of YouTube videos. A lot of people have discussed this. We wanted to take some time to discuss it ourselves. So Bruce, what do you think, real quick, about the monolithic versus generic idea? And how did you see that, I guess, occur in our playstyle, now that I've kind of introduced you to this concept?
Right. So, well, I mean, I guess I've had the concept in my own brain as well, too, but I always called it something different. I mean, I look at people's commanders, and when this language around a monolithic commander is that your deck hinges on your commander being in play. I've always looked at it slightly as like, is your commander a threat and a lightning rod for removal from the moment it hits the battlefield?
You're looking at it as more of like, not a negative aspect, but more of like a polarity idea.
Yeah.
Positive and negative.
Sure. Yeah, so this sort of commander would, in my estimation, has always led me to, that is an on-site, I need to kill that stat.
Just from the PTSD from all these, things we've played against, right? Like,
well, yeah,
Urza and yeah.
I in all my years playing, I have yet to play an actual earnest to goodness Urza deck. So I would actually like to see that kill me, because I haven't done it yet. But I'll give you an example. Animar would be one that does come to mind as a deck that has like absolutely laid waste to me before, and I'm like, if I see Animar, I know I need to remove Animar immediately.
So that was where you're coming from, is that idea, not just the commander being the central focus of the deck, but basically there's a reason why it's being targeted like 6 or 7 times in a game.
Yes. Yeah, because I know that if I don't remove it, I will soon be swimming in Eldrazi and dying. So,
yeah, I understand.
So, anyway, so this idea is like, I've been kicking it around as well too, and in decks that I've got that would meet this description of monolithic, I have had to try and lean into different ways of building it than I have a more generic deck. Right. I'll use the example I have that comes to mind very readily is my Maha deck. So she's a green-white landfall base commander that whenever time you make a land drop, if she's in play, she sees that and she proceeds to create a 1/1 warrior token. Yeah. And the idea being that you go wide real quick, make a bunch of land drops, and then you overrun the table somehow.
So a deck that I have played recently that Bruce has seen is the Ojirac Sinel Burn deck. It's mono red. It's basically making pingers into 4 or 10 damage based on the commander's power. So a lot of it prefaces on him or her or it being out.
I think it's it.
I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, same principle is that the deck is tied in there. Like the whole purpose is this thing is supposed to help you win the game.
Yeah. And so, knowing that about the construction of the deck, you have to allow certain things that in your deck to be accounted for to try and maintain that commander. I know that Maha is a lightning rod. Everybody who sees her goes, that thing needs to die.
Yeah.
How do I prevent that? And so my deck, beyond the fact that it's got the angle where I want to make as many land drops as I can to take advantage of this, I've got the angle where I want to go find my finisher, which is oftentimes me going to go find a Crater Hoof Behemoth or an Overrun.
Sure.
then I need then there's the slant of the deck that's like, how do I keep Maha from dying? And that was the three things I had in my brain that I needed to address as I built the deck. Land drops, finisher, protector.
So through this deck building process, it's kind of shifted from, it used to be hyper focus on the theme, right? When I first started playing, it was how many redundant effects can I get that will establish desired outcome.
Right.
So So like for Maha, it was like all the landfall stuff, all of the token doublers, all the token producing things, and then see what happens. Or like Scoot Swarm, when it came out, it automatically was in the deck. But now it's like, okay, we have all these pieces, but how do we keep the train running? How do we keep everything, running without that sort of disruption?
Yeah, and I think one piece that I think is starting to muddy the water is that as more cards get added to the card pool that support various strategies, there's almost too many options to lean into a strategy.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you think about it, if you were going to play a token strategy, you could play your Doubling Season, you could play your Parallel Lives, you could play your Anointed Procession, you could go play Divine Visitation, you could go play on and on and on and on and on without any hesitation and find a whole slew of these really powerful components that are going to ramp up your token generation.
Mm-hmm.
However, does that actually benefit your deck, or is there a point where you need to stop adding those pieces and go back to what makes your deck go?
And that's where the generic idea comes into place. So it's like, okay, we're taking these good cards, we're building a deck around these good cards, maybe these 25 cards that help us further a particular goal, and the commander is just being used for the colors, or for the card advantage, or for something else that provides that sort of oomph. So for example, I have a friend, he just played this old Rutstein deck that he plays. It's a Reanimator list. Rutstein is literally just the it's a good early blocker, and it creates a potential for him to, reanimate a huge big baddie, like on turn 3 or 4. And that's really it. That is really what the deck does. But if you shut down the graveyard, the deck is kind of toast after that. Similar to what happened to you when we were playing, where you played a really cool monolithic commander, Valraz, which I haven't seen in forever. But it's a scavenge deck, and basically you had all these counters on it and had a big graveyard, and one Bojuka Bog ruined your day. So the challenge is really, the generic effect is like, okay, Valraz is like the commander, but I'm really focusing on beefing up creatures on my board by exiling from my graveyard. Maybe I'm playing other sorts of effects that do something similar, like Insidious Roots or something, and I'm making it work that way. But I guess it's hard when you try to focus on both, because it's impossible, really, to completely focus on both in a deck. Yeah. Because of the way Commander works. You know what I'm saying? In 60 card is different because you're going through a thematic approach of how do I win the game as fast as possible, or how do I efficiently play these 5 turns, these 6 turns. Commander's like, there's so many different variables and different playstyles that can impact how your deck performs. So
no, absolutely. And I think I think it's interesting because I think when I started playing the game, my approach was very much using the generic approach to my commanders. So any commanders I picked, I wasn't leaning heavily into their mechanic or their whatever they did, and there was something ancillary that I could do that was interesting. So, great example of my very first commander deck, I still have it intact, is Lavinia of the 10th, and she's a pretty brutal stacks commander because of the fact that if you can use her as enter the battlefield ability to detain all non-land permanents that your opponents control before and less, you can actually shut off a table very hard. All their mana rocks, toast. All their mana dorks, utility creatures, just done. Leaving them only the biggest and baddest things. However, I didn't lean into that. I used her for the colors and built a blue-white control deck that, to this day, I have intact, and I will bring it out when somebody needs to be told no a lot. And that's how the deck is built. It's built as a control deck where my goal is to say no. And if I can use her ability to make it harder for my opponents to do things, great. I'll do it.
Sure.
but it's not intrinsic to how that deck plays or wins. And so, like, it's like that's how I started building get decks. And you can see my iterations of my first, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 decks. That's how they were built. In fact, I had a teamer deck with Yazova Dragonclaw where I didn't want to cast Yazova even once. It was of no value to me to cast Yazova. I just played her for the colors because there weren't a lot of good teamer options that I could get a hold of easily. So now there's like an ungodly number of options. I could find a million choices.
Sure.
But so consequently, I have taken Yazova apart because I don't find that it was interesting to play her because she doesn't do anything intrinsically cool. So that's the drawback I found with the generic decks is that, like, sure, I could play them and they do, like, the deck plays well. It does the thing, like whatever the thing is. Like that one was a lot of dragons and dragony things, but that wasn't. Now I play Miram in that place easily without a hesitation. So
I found the opposite just because of the way I play the game. I think where I really, when I started playing, my stuff would always eat removal for if it was threat assessment related or just because it's the people I played with, they didn't really care one way or the other. So I started to build decks where I would strive away and be like, okay, if my thing is killed, what happens? If it's exile, what do I do? So my decks naturally created that progression because I think of the playgroup I first was exposed to. And then I was like, okay, now that I've done all these different kinds of decks and I started playing all these combos and I got rid of that and I was bored with that. I think the evolution, you can always switch back and forth, and as long as you have a clear goal in mind, like, okay, my monolithic deck is not worse or better than my generic deck. It's just a matter of what I feel like doing with these cards.
right,
Where a lot of people put themselves in these boxes, they're like, oh, well, the monolithic is bad. But really, like, some monolithic decks, like my Greven deck, is really fast and really hard to respond to.
Is it ever?
You know what I mean? So, like, and it's an old commander, and many people have probably seen it before. It's just the nature of what, I mean, maybe not from 2015, but, like,
I'm going to speculate that actually most of the player base right now
they don't have no idea. Yeah.
No idea.
Sure.
And so when you sit down and play Greven, they go, "Oh, cool! What is that all about?" And then you like run
Smack
them over
in the face,
with a truck. I'm like,
it's not perfect. It's not a perfect version because there's some, like there's like the perfect versions online or whatever, but I don't know. It's just like it depends on what you feel like doing, and that's where this debate has become. It's like some people are on the fence on one side, where they're like, the generic is better, and then the other side, it's like, well, it just depends on the situation, and it also depends on like what the goal in mind is, right?
Okay, and so I think you and I, Pete, we come from the same sort of background here, where we're not making a judgment whether one position is good or bad. I recognize that people would like to have their deck be more resilient to being derailed, and so, I need to move towards the generic construction and I'm away from this relying heavily on my commander because it's too easy to derail. Except if you look at EDH Rec, who are all the most popular commanders? Most of these would be deemed, in my estimation, monolithic commanders, where they are leaning
hyper focused on some theme, some sort of thing, with that card being at the center.
Absolutely. So I mean, like, let's be real. You're playing the Dragon. It's like the number 2 most popular deck ever.
Right.
Like, you're telling me that deck, like, you want to play your Dragon and stick it, and then reap the value of having your dragons all over the place. And everyone knows that if you play an Dragon deck, you need to make sure the Dragon doesn't stick. You need to pressure their life total. You need to blow up their mana. It's not rocket science, and like, it's how the deck folds. If you do those three pillars of handling the Dragon deck, you're going to be able to keep it contained. If you can't, well, then you're going to have dragons running wild all over you. But like, to go and tell somebody that their Dragon deck is bad because it's a monolithic commander and it's too easy to derail, I'm like, no, that person is enjoying playing that deck. That's the whole point, is like letting people enjoy what they like to play. So I can all appreciate people like to win and like to play and like to be resilient and all those things. I'm not going to take away someone's enjoyment. let's say your deck is inherently bad because of this new term monolithic that pops up, and because of content creators and Reddit posters who are all over it. I think having a commander that is intrinsically powerful is great fun. You have to be prepared for what that means to your meta, to people you're going to play against, and you need to take steps to make sure it doesn't get derailed too easily.
On the flip side, I've had experiences with making a commander that's too open-ended, where I have 3 or 4 things I'm trying to do at once. So I'm stretching my deck too thin, and then it's this concept of like, master of all trades, or you really just master of none of them. You know what I mean? Because you're doing forward, like some of these commanders, it's like Rutstein. I've built and rebuilt that deck like maybe 7 times in the last year, like differently. And it's just because I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what to do and to keep it in a specific realm. And I think sometimes the monolithic decks, it's easier to build because you don't have to. You're not overthinking it. Like I just built a new deck that Bruce saw. It was fun. It was Commissar Severina. It's from the Warhammer Precon. It's like a Orzhov card, and it was very much revolved around power 2 or less creatures, and the commander was a win con in the deck. And yes, it was kind of generic in the sense of I didn't necessarily need the commander out to win the game, but it helped to have it there. It was like an extra bonus for me, but the deck ran well because I had a theme that was so clear cut that it was easy to stay focused. Where other decks and other metas and stuff, it's more difficult because who you play against on a weekly basis is a challenge. And then also just trying to keep the deck together and have a pattern. Because you could put 25 removal spells in your deck, but maybe your deck actually doesn't do anything. On the flip side, you could put 25 infinite combos in your deck, and the deck is very inconsistent, or it doesn't really do what you want it to do. So that's like just the caveat that we've sort of boiled it down to. And then, Bruce, I mean, what other takeaways? I know we've sort of learned a few things about our own experiences, but what have you learned from this overall conversation? I mean, I had this very black and white way of looking at win cons, but what did you have? What were you thinking about?
Well, the conversation we started having on the weekend after we played, and then extending into today. I think it really leaned into this idea of what happens if your deck blows up, and having some measure of redundancy is inherently, and you need it. If it isn't there, you stop playing the game. What happened to me? Varol's had the graveyard removed. My deck fell apart. It wasn't fun. Other decks and other situations if you're playing a generic deck and you might have a very powerful deck, but it's kind of, you're just playing a good group of cards.
I'll give you an example. So I have a friend who plays a Super Friends deck. Okay.
Sorry. Anyway.
Super Friends deck, but it's just all of I guess quote unquote the best planeswalkers. Yeah. So there are times where this person will play a planeswalker, but the planeswalker itself doesn't really do anything. It's just a good card on its own, so it's challenging. And that's not a knock on the deck, because the deck's won plenty of times. Recently he beat me in a really cool way where he ultimated the new Vraska and gave me enough poison counters to kill me, which was kind of cool. But you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just a challenge.
Well, I do have a thing on planeswalkers, and why I think they're probably not great in Commander beyond the fact that they die readily, is the fact that it leads to decision paralysis. And every planeswalker, every time you go to use one of his activated abilities, you have at least 2 options, maybe 3, depending on which planeswalker you're playing. And over the course of a game, and particularly if you're playing a Super Friends deck, the decisions that you have to make pile up, and they end up a lot of extra mental burden there.
Well, that's the generic idea too. It's like everything piles up because you're like, oh, I have this card in my hand. Where's the other combo piece? Or I have this ramp piece, but I'm not sure if I should play this now. Where like a landfall deck, it's very simple. Turn 1, I play a land. Turn 2, I play rampant
Yes.
growth. Turn 3, I play cultivate, or I play harrow. Most likely harrow now. Cultivate's kind of phased out. Turn 4, I play this. You're very clear in terms of what your turn cycle looks like.
Right.
Some of these monolithic and some generic as well, especially if the theme is very clear cut. But yeah, there's decision making. If you don't have that like decision making process for commander, like I feel like it would be a challenge for an inexperienced player to start with a generic sort of deck concept because they don't have enough experience playing the game in commander.
Well, I mean, for sure, and like that's one of the problems. Like, I would cite almost every Simic deck that's out there running around, whether it's Tatiova, AC, Slogurk, whatever. Slogurk's my example. When I play Slogurk, I end up with decision paralysis because I end up with so many cards in hand and so many options to play. What do I do? What is my optimal line? And I find it actually very burdensome to track it all and to track what the optimal play is in order to assert pressure on the battlefield. So there's value to be had in a monolithic commander where now you're on the rails. You're going to do the thing. You're going to make a lot of energy. You're going to make a lot of Eldrazi. You're going to make a lot of something, and you're going to try and use that to win the game. Whereas a generic deck, you could be all over the place, and now you've got to
it's like putting a puzzle together. It's like putting a puzzle together, right? Where some people they love that. Yeah. Like our good friend Alex, that's his bread and butter. That's what he does. All right, and he hasn't played in a while, but a lot of his decks were very open ended in the sense of like you could replace 3 or 4 different cards and the deck would run the same. Right. Because of the way he is very skilled with his deck building, and then also just the commanders he chose to run. He was smart enough to know like early on because he just was good at this sort of game. That his stuff would be removed. That like there is going to be hitches in the road, and it's not going to happen every single time. That's not going to be perfect every single time.
Right.
So I think the expectation has also changed, where just on like a psychological standpoint of players' mindsets, they expect their thing to be done because a lot of people aren't playing removal or whatever, or like the pods are very casual. They're not playing the stacks pieces and stuff because they don't feel comfortable with their friends playing it or whatever the reason may be. Where it's almost better when that happens because then you actually really have to assess what's going on with the deck building strategies of these two things. So,
another takeaway that I take from this conversation, and what I'm playing on Saturday night yielded was the fact that when people use EDH Rec as a way to generate and build the list that they're going to compile for their deck, they don't necessarily look at it as a tool to shows what synergistic cards
they're
are.
Not looking at the aggregate total, like the percentage. No. They're looking at like, this card could fit in my deck because it fits in these people's decks. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is there's an over-reliance on EDH Rec to generate this sort of data, and people put all these great synergistic cards in the deck without regard for what is actually your deck's game plan or what your meta is you're going to face in your meta. And so you may construct a deck that is quote unquote perfect to EDH Rec styles with all the top rated cards, but doesn't actually address the needs of playing your meta because you are blind to one particular strategy, or you've got particular holes in your game plan that need to be shored up. So I think EDH Rec is actually part of the contributing problem here. I'm never going to say we don't want the data. Like we all do. Like we love the data.
Yeah.
But the aggregated data from EDH Rec,
I think the data should be at the end. I think like you should build your deck, test it, play with your friends, and then go there and be like, I played this deck like 10 times. What works, what doesn't work? This is what happens. Oh, this card that someone else is playing, that fits. That'll fit in my deck, and it'll fit with the people I'm playing with.
Well, also there you have your sample size. Yeah. So many people build a deck and then they play it 2 or 3 times and like, this is no good. I want to tear it apart. This is terrible. I'm never going to win. This is both. So, settle down. It'll be okay.
Sure. Yeah, simmer down a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Point two, ask the people you're playing against. What would you do differently? I thought, Pete, you did this
For sure.
beautifully, where
Yeah.
you asked the guys at the table, what would you include in this list that'd be different? So Commissar Severina was pretty neat. And I said to Pete, do you have a Yawgmoth in there? Yawgmoth Thrawn Physician would be a great inclusion in that list. And he
Yeah.
was like,
For sure.
oh, yeah, that's super cool.
I really like that card too. It's one of my favorite cards that's been printed in the last 20 years.
It plays beautifully in that strategy. But you had overlooked it or forgotten or whatever. But you need a sample size of your own research. What does this deck actually do what I want it to do? Or do I find that I have got cards that are sit in my hand dead? I'm going to go back to our garbage or great. Like that 6 mana Storm of Souls
Sure.
is a great card. But if I put it in my deck just because it's synergistic with my strategy and it sits dead in my hand 8 out of 10 games, is this actually a card that I need to put in my deck? The answer is probably not.
The other flip side is there are probably budget options that would be better than those typical good cards that might work better in that particular deck. Like Rhystic Study versus Mystic Remora sort of idea.
Or Verity Circle.
Oh yeah. So actually, that's a better example. So like the tapping down stuff. If you're playing like Hilda or something, you probably would run Rhystic anyway because it's just a good card. But Verity Circle might be better in terms of it might not be removed as fast because people aren't going to really care until it starts to become a problem. Where Rhystic Study is immediately removed on site normally in most pods, or they play around it so that way you don't get the value. Where Verity Circle, it's pretty much a guaranteed draw. Granted, there's 2 different cards, completely different. But in that particular situation, there might be slightly better.
As a peasant, and not a rich guy,
as a peasant,
because I got 4 kids, I play Verity Circle, and I play it unabashedly, and you'd be surprised how many cards it draws you. It draws you quite a number. And I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty okay with this, because it cost me 25 cents versus $40 or whatever Rhystic Study cost me. So there's a bit of a...
So to tie this together, my last sort of takeaway is like this really got me thinking about what type of win cons are experienced with these 2 types of decks. So like Monolithic, you can have a Monolithic deck that has an infinite combo. The commander is like part of the infinite combo, like Jaxus, for example. Right? It's a combo deck, it has some resiliency, but if Jaxus is killed like 8 times, it's going to be difficult for me to get back in the game. There's a lot of the Monolithic decks are more so the Voltron style, the big fat battlecruiser style, pumping out some dragons, or it's tokens, which I've noticed a lot of. The generic style, I feel like, has a little bit of elements of those things, but the main focus necessarily isn't dipping into one more than the other, unless it's like a Thassa's Oracle consultation combo or something like that. Or you're in CDH, where CDH is more of like you're playing for the colors, not necessarily for the cards. You know what I mean? You're playing for the access to those colors, which I like that. I think applying this concept to that is actually really cool because you would see like the benefits of playing more of like an open-ended, these are the top cards I want to play. Where casual, it's like we have more of a bandwidth. And then the burn thing, I'm not really sure where that fits because I don't personally think burn exists much anymore in most metas. Granted, there are people that play burn still. And I think burn decks are really interesting, but it's difficult now to sort of pace sometimes. If you play a burn deck that can't like board wipe the table or yes, life gain, life drain. We've debated this, but I still think that's more of a combo sort of kill than burn. But we should explore this further, I think.
Well, okay. So I mean, I think the idea, like
in another episode,
for sure. I think we'll touch into that idea of the burn, though. I think burn in Commander is tricky because now you're talking about when initially burn was conceptualized. It was conceptualized in a 1v1 format, where you're looking to reduce somebody from 20 to 0. When you're now talking Commander, you're talking 3 opponents, 120 life. And the measure of getting that to 0 through burn is really difficult. So just the sheer structure of the format does not lend itself well to a burn deck. Now, that said, we played a game Saturday night that lasted 30 minutes and we burned each other out something spectacular.
That was an incredible game. One of the best I've played in the last 6 months, honestly. Like
audience 30 minutes. It was over.
The key was we all played decks that were very similar. We played except I think Bruce. Bruce was kind of the odd man out there.
I was trying, and then I just never got a chance to because there was too much pain.
The other three of us, one was playing what is it? The Viashino, the lizard.
Yeah,
I guess Yarok. Yeah, Yarlock. It's like the mana burn. I was playing a Xenaghost deck, which is just very aggressive, and then George, our other buddy, was playing a mono red group slug deck. So it was really fun and I think testing that, like putting 4 monolithic commanders together that are more of a similar style and versus a generic pile that are similar styles, that's when the games will be very, very bright and very exciting.
It was cool.
You know, there are scenarios where you have a generic commander that's really oppressive, or you have a monolithic commander that's really oppressive, and it's a challenge. So I think identifying that also helps, just in general, playing with your friends and playing with people that you like to play with at your LGSs or online. Identifying that stuff, you might be able to pick up some things in their deck and why their deck is constructed the way it is. So, and at the end, we kind of put our decks into a little compartment for each. So I think we pretty much were even. Like, there's a few that surprised me for Bruce. And Bruce, any that surprised you? I mean, in terms of how I labeled them? Here?
I don't think so. I think the decks I've seen that are particularly your monolithic ones, I would agree. I don't think I've seen your Narset Enlightened Exile deck played yet, but the other 4 I've all seen, and I would agree that they would be ones where you lean heavily into your commander. I have not seen too much of the Ancient one, but I have seen the other 4 recently. I can speak to those being interchangeable.
The Ancient one, it's just I'm milling myself and playing Reanimate and stuff, so the commander helps me with the colors, and it helps me potentially get there a little bit faster. But it's not a win con unless I give it unless I hit someone 4 times with it. But even then, they deserve to die if they lose to it. But
fair enough.
Yeah, I probably should play that a little bit more with you because it's just it shows the generic sort of thing. Like it shows it sort of like a T.
Let's go through and list the ones that you sort of identified as being monolithic decks in your collection. Okay. Like, who do you have? So, the audience can't see our notes, so.
Yeah. And we'll post them as well. But I got Ojir Axonal, which is mono red. It's just straight up burn. A lot of people have seen that now recently. The commander needs to be out for the pingers to deal more than 1 damage for when I cast non-creature spells. Jaxus is my favorite deck to play. I've mentioned it before on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But it has a catch because it has backup ways to protect the commander and also has backup ways to not have to have the commander out to win. And I put that in place on purpose because I experienced a monolithic plight where people were just killing my stuff all the time.
Well, I mean, you kind of earned it too hard, right?
I did.
You beat us up enough times with Jaxus that we kind of had to do the thing.
Yeah. The Fabian is a tokens deck. It basically needs it to get there. And I have to protect it, so I'm playing like a lot of protection spells that I didn't really think about playing until recent because people have removed it so often now, and it's 6 mana, so it's a lot. It's expensive. Grevin is a Voltron deck. That one definitely is kill on sight. That deck is very quick. My friends have died to it many times, and it is a heck of a lot of fun to play and play against because it puts everybody on a clock. And then finally, the Narset Enlightened Exile is a Pro S deck. It enables me to go quicker, and it helps me push a lot of damage. I'm still ironing out the kinks of the deck, so still have to figure that one out. But I think it's monolithic because Narset helps me win, where I just don't really do enough of the token production to really push the damage. But anyway, Bruce, the only surprise I had was I thought Optimus Prime could really function without it, but I only saw it twice, so I'm not exactly sure. But
so the problem with Optimus Prime is that many of the other composite components are small, like they're small creatures that are value based. So if I'm going to make enough things be scary threats, I'm going to need to have Optimus stick on the battlefield for a while. Now, he's kind of handy that way because he doesn't die. So if you have him transformed as a robot, when he does inevitably eat a board wipe or a removal spell, he transforms back into the truck, and you can get him back flipped over as a robot. So he's a little bit more
Well, you got
difficult.
a little bit of that the protection sort of idea, or like resiliency in the deck.
Yeah. So he sort of brings that, and that gives me an opportunity to build my board up. And so when he goes off, and he can go off really hard, and he can build some really scary creatures to close out a game. If he ends up being a little bit more slow paced, like on Saturday night, I was, in terms of my ability to ramp, I was seriously hampered. I didn't get the ramp pieces needed to keep up, and then when we started playing Mana Barbs and Torbran and other things that just meant that tapping my land was extremely painful, I just really couldn't keep up with the other players. So I was in a bit of a pickle. And so Optimus Prime wasn't as effective as he probably could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the deck kind of hinges on him. The other one, Slimefoot, well, it's a token deck. Slimefoot is interesting because he doesn't want to come out right away. You don't want Slimefoot to come down on turn 3. You want Slimefoot to come down on like turn 8, and after you've been set up with some stuff, so that you can then activate him and make a whole army of tokens, and then they can start dying for value. So that's kind of Slimefoot's thing. Faldorn is the Gruul Exile Matters commander, so you need your commander to care about exiling things to get the value, which makes the wolves and so on and so forth. Dralnu, so that deck can function on its own without a commander, but it functions much better if you can then use Dralnu as a Snapcaster mage to do the Snapcaster thing.
I've seen that before, and that is a trip.
Yeah, and then the last one is Maha, which is again it's a landfall deck.
Which we spoke before.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. And then finally, to wrap it up here, we had our generic picks, which I mentioned the ancient one before. I have a Clunch deck where Clunch really is just an enabler of my, madness and punishment of players for their greed.
It's like giving and taking away with the same hand. Like, I'm going to give you this thing and take it away. Give this thing, take it away. Yeah. And it's really frustrating, audience, to play it. But like, Pete doesn't need to play Glunch, and it's still just as frustrating. So
I don't play it very often, and I'm still making tweaks to it as well, based on some of the new cards.
It makes us sad. It makes us all sad.
Because stacks decks normally very clear about why they're stacking you. This is a little bit of a different ball game. So anyway, that deck is kind of a pain. Commissar, Severina Rain, which I talked about earlier as well. New deck I've just built. Have a lot of fun with it. Don't necessarily need the commander out. It just enables me to potentially win with it. And I just have a very clear theme. I talked about this earlier. If you have a really clear theme in a generic deck, the generic deck isn't really that generic. It's just thematic. So, and finally, we got Old Rutstein, which that one is just an enabler of the theme that I tried to do multiple times, and I don't necessarily need the commander out to win the game. And then Xenagos. Xenagos is interesting because you would think, because it's so aggressive, I need it out to actually get there. But I'm playing a lot of big fatties that protect themselves, so...
less necessary.
Yeah, it's not as necessary, and there's ways for me to cheat out these expensive creatures, so it's not very much of a concern. Although Xenagos is super nice, obviously, to close a game out, it is basically a win con in the deck. And Bruce, I'm not surprised by any of these picks, especially because I've seen them played before against me. What would you say?
So Sidisi Brood Tyrant is very similar to your Ancient One deck. It's a mill deck where I'm looking to then rebuy stuff from my graveyard.
Yeah,
there are oodles of ways to mill in that deck, so it's a nice to have. I've seen Sidisi played as a Zombie Matters commander, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not what I'm doing.
Not your thing.
If there are zombie tokens made, terrific. I have things to block with. But if
you're using it for the colors, really. Yeah, you're really using it for the colors. Sure.
Alessia is the same sort of way. If Alessia can hit the table and I can use her to attack, I can get a lot of value. Otherwise, there's enough just nasty Mardu things in that deck that it doesn't matter. Just scary stuff.
That was my
and
first commander. Side note: that was my first commander I ever built. Was an Alesha deck. So
yeah,
thanks for keeping it alive.
no problem, man. Daggertar, same way. Like Daggertar is nice because it allows me to. You can do some really silly things with counters.
Who knew?
Steal things off your opponent's stuff. I have literally watched people attack me with things with counters, and I go, "I will take those 3 counters, please. Put them on my blocker. I eat your best
Why
thing."
did you do that?
And they go, "How?" Daggertar. And they go, "No."
Of course, because Daggertar says move a +1/+1 counter from one creature onto another.
Yeah, so I can take them off
Silly.
you, put them on my stuff, and people hate that. So I think it's hilarious.
That is hilarious.
It's more fun than it's really really fun. Slogurk is a prototypical Simic value pile of lands, and no one can like. There's so many interchangeable pieces, nobody cares. So it just I end up with more cards in hand that I know what to do with, more lands on the table, and in real danger of dying to my own milling effects. The last one is Gimli, which is actually a new one that I built. That
one is cool. That one's really neat.
So I wasn't aware. So I kind of built it with the idea that Gimli could be on the battlefield, and that if you have ways to sacrifice creatures, give him indestructible, he'll stick around, and he might, but you don't need to. You just he's not actually intrinsic to the deck. You just need replaceable garbage, and most of the stuff you make in the deck is absolute garbage, and you can just sack it to the Ashnod's Altar. Oh, deal of damage. Oh, there's a Goblin Bombardment. Sack it to that. Deal of damage. Oh, I'll sack it to the whatever. Oodles of things. You never would have thought that a red-green Aristocrats deck was a thing,
but it works.
And then it exists, and I'm like, this is and Gimli. If Gimli's on the battlefield, even better, because now I got a big fat thing and it's going to fight your best thing, and I'm going to have a field day. But it's not and then it's also infuriating because your opponents try and remove your stuff, and you're like, I don't care. Yeah. Remove all my things. I don't. It doesn't matter to me. And they go, this is infuriating. Why doesn't it matter? And I'm like, oh, make more goblin tokens. What are you going to do? So, so yeah. And so those are my sort of. I mean, I have more. I don't.
You have a lot more decks than I do, to be fair. But I think.
Yeah, it's a problem. I have.
Just to tie it up. Basically, just identify for yourselves, monolithic, generic, what do you want to do with your deck? Go from there. There's no wrong answer. Again, this game is very open-ended, a very gray sort of style of play. And I enjoy this kind of deck-building discussion, Bruce, because it helps me, I think, actually with my own decks. Kind of like, you practice how you play, and I just appreciate other people who are smarter than me coming up with these concepts. And anyway, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think we kind of just... I think we're good. There's not much more that I can say. We exhausted the conversation. I feel like...
I think we've had a thorough conversation around this concept, and I think the takeaway for audiences is like you said, Pete said, look at your decks, and if you feel like your deck is falling in the category of one or the other, maybe you need to adjust your deck building to meet that label.
The beauty is it can change. It can change from one to the other. It can dip into it. It's just more so what the style is. I would just be clear about what you want your deck to do, and then it won't be as frustrating to figure out like how to protect your stuff or how to win the game. And that's it. Thank you, audience, and take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.
We have some other people to thank, right? We always have people.
Yeah. I mean,
so we have to thank the Lewis Council. The Lewis Council is our home on the internet. You can go find them at thelowiscouncil.com. We also say thank you to Nick Douglas for our lovely intro and outro music. He's got we got a link to his work there in the show notes. So by the way, go have a look. We also have a link to all of our social medias. You can go check it out. And you want to find our decks, you can go find them on Moxfield.com, looking up our username, the Epic Experiment Podcast. All right, I think now that's everybody. That's it all. It's done now, folks. Have a good night.
Take care.
Real.
Happy Canada Day and happy 4th of July for everybody.
Pew pew! That's fireworks, folks. No,
eventually we'll get the little animations going or something.
we'll start doing this on YouTube and have a video clip, and there'll be like fireworks popping off behind me.
We should honestly. Let's not messing around,
Dude, I'm not nearly pretty enough for you two. But anyway.
That's okay.
Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a good night. We'll talk to you again soon, everyone.
Take care.